I was perched on the edge of my velvet sofa, the morning sun spilling across the living room like it had no idea chaos was about to walk through the door. My laptop sat abandoned on the coffee table, half-finished work emails blinking in silent judgment. I had just poured a cup of coffee, the aroma curling around me like a tiny comfort, when the sound of the front door slamming shut echoed through the apartment. And there he was, Mark, my husband, smiling like he hadn't just announced something that would turn my meticulously planned morning upside down. And behind him, like some uninvited storm cloud, were his mother and sister. "Good morning, Sam," Mark chirped cheerfully, oblivious to the weight of the 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me.
"So, surprise.
"We're all moving in together starting today." The words hit me like ice water. I clutched my mug, feeling the porcelain bite my fingers. My heart thumped in disbelief, a mix of panic and irritation swirling inside me. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream, all at once. The silk of my blouse felt suffocating, the sunlight suddenly too harsh. I forced a smile, my mind racing. How does he not see how impossible this is? How did my carefully constructed life lead to this exact moment? I could feel a tiny edge of irony creeping in. Of course, the universe always had a flair for dramatic entrances. I set the mug down, breathing through the tension, eyes scanning their faces. Mark's mom's smile was wide, his sister's gaze curious. They expected warmth. They expected hospitality. What they weren't ready for was me. I remember the first time I realized I had to stand alone. I was 24, newly married to Mark, full of hope and naivety, convinced that love alone could navigate any storm. But storms have a cruel way of finding you. It was a Friday evening, and I had come to Mark's family home for what I thought would be a casual dinner. His mom, Linda, was bustling around the kitchen, her smile tight, her eyes always calculating. His sister, Rachel, lingered behind her like a shadow, always observing, silently judging. And me, I had a lump in my throat, the kind that rises when you know confrontation is inevitable. "You really think you can handle him?" Linda asked casually, as if testing me without looking me in the eye. Her tone was syrupy, but there was ice underneath. "Mark has his ways, you know. Not everyone can manage it." Rachel snorted, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah, Samantha, are you sure you're ready for this? Living with Mark, it's not easy. Not everyone survives his family." My hands shook slightly as I set down the salad bowl I had carried in. I could feel every eye in the room weighing me, examining me like I was some fragile experiment. Hurt and frustration churned together, sharp as glass. I wanted to scream, to tell them that my life was my own, but the words stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. It was then that my grandmother's advice floated into my mind, as if whispered across time. "Never shrink yourself for anyone. Your strength is your story, Samantha. Carry it, even when they doubt you." I clutched the pendant she had given me years ago, a small silver charm in the shape of a rising phoenix. I could feel its cool weight against my palm, grounding me. It reminded me that I had a choice: fold under judgment or rise. I drew in a deep breath, my shoulders straightening. "I can handle him, and I can handle this family," I said, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "But I will not let anyone dictate my worth. Not now, not ever." That night, I walked out of their house not with defeat, but with resolve. It was the first time I decided that my life, my home, my happiness, would be built on my terms. And I knew, deep down, that no one, not even Mark's family, would ever control me again. The months after that dinner were some of the loneliest, hardest of my life. But they were also the most defining. I realized quickly that if I wanted to stand tall, I needed more than just words. I needed something no one could take away from me. Independence.
My own foundation.
My own voice. I started small. A part-time job at a design studio downtown. At first, I was the one making coffee, organizing files, learning to smile even when exhaustion pressed down like lead. But in the quiet hours after everyone had left, I studied. I watched the senior designers, absorbed every choice of color, every stroke of creativity. And slowly, very slowly, I started sketching my own ideas. I'll never forget the night when my mentor, Julia Harper, found me hunched over a drafting table, eyes bleary, hair tied in a messy bun. She was the kind of woman who carried authority without ever raising her voice. Sharp, elegant, respected. She glanced at my sketches, then at me, and said, "You've got something, Samantha. Don't hide it." Those words, they lit a fire in me. The journey wasn't easy. There were nights I cried into my pillow, doubting myself, wondering if I was just fooling everyone. There were mornings I stared at my reflection, noticing chipped nail polish and dark circles under my eyes, asking myself if it was worth it. But then I would touch the phoenix pendant around my neck and remember, I wasn't building this just for me. I was building it for the woman I had promised my younger self I'd become. My first win came unexpectedly. A small boutique downtown agreed to feature one of my designs in their spring collection. It wasn't much, just a single dress on a rack crowded with dozens. But the day I walked by and saw a woman actually buying it, her face lighting up as she held it to her body, I had to step outside and breathe in the cold air before my tears spilled over. From there, doors began to open. Slowly, carefully but surely. Word spread. My sketches turned into collections. My part-time job turned into partnerships. And soon, I was no longer just Samantha, the assistant. I was Samantha Hayes, designer and entrepreneur. But I didn't broadcast it. Not to Mark. Not to his family. I kept my wins tucked close to my chest like secret treasures. On social media, I shared nothing more than casual brunch photos or vague captions. I never wanted them to know, not until I was ready. Because part of me knew this day would come. The day when they'd walk into my home expecting to find the same girl they once dismissed, and instead discover the woman I had become. And now, as I looked at Mark, his mom, and his sister standing in my living room with their suitcases, I realized this was that moment. The three of them stood in the entryway of my apartment, suitcases lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. Mark was still smiling, utterly oblivious, while Linda and Rachel scanned the room as though they had just stepped onto unfamiliar terrain. And in a way, they had. My apartment wasn't just a home. It was a story, my story, woven into every detail. The modern art on the walls wasn't just decoration. Each piece had been chosen from galleries that once rejected me until I had the courage to return, not as a dreamer, but as a buyer. The shelves, filled with books on design and entrepreneurship, whispered of nights I had studied when no one believed in me. Even the faint scent of lavender candles carried a memory of long nights working until dawn, when I needed something soft to counterbalance the sharpness of ambition. Linda's eyes lingered on the framed certificate in the hallway, National Rising Designer Award, Samantha Hayes. Her lips pressed into a line. Rachel, trailing behind, stopped at the coffee table where one of my fashion magazines lay open. On the cover, me. Not in a wedding dress. Not as a wife. But as a designer, standing tall in front of one of my collections. "Sam, what is this?" Rachel asked, her voice caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. I let them look. I let the silence stretch until even Mark began to notice that something was different, that the woman standing before him wasn't the same Samantha who had once walked out of his family's house clutching a bowl of salad and swallowing down humiliation. I straightened, adjusting the cuffs of my blouse, and smiled with a calmness I had earned. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment, "the magazine, the art, is my life. My work, my success." Mark blinked, trying to process. "Wait, you did all this?" I tilted my head, an amused edge tugging at my lips. "Yes, Mark.
I did."
While you thought I was just keeping busy, I was building something real. Something lasting. Something that belongs to me. Linda finally spoke, her voice low. "You mean to tell me you've been hiding this? From us? From Mark?" "Not hiding," I corrected, my voice steady, rich with a conviction that had taken years to grow. "Protecting. Protecting it from voices that once told me I wasn't enough. Protecting it from anyone who thought I couldn't handle your son, or this family, or life itself." Rachel's cheeks flushed pink. She sank into the arm of the sofa, flipping through the magazine in disbelief. You're actually famous? I laughed softly, shaking my head. Not famous. Just accomplished. And that's enough. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his confusion thick in the air. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him, really looked at him, the man I had once thought would always understand me. Because, Mark, every time I tried to show you who I was becoming, you brushed it off. You didn't see me. You only saw the version of me that made sense to you. A quiet, agreeable wife who'd mold herself around your life. I couldn't risk my dreams in that shadow. Silence pressed against the walls. Their disbelief was almost tangible, their eyes darting between me and the life I had created. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under their gaze, they were. And in that moment, I realized the power had shifted. For years, they had expected to walk into my life and find a woman they could control, someone who would bend and fold to their comfort. But instead, they had stepped into the home of a woman who had already risen alone, strong, and unapologetic. I folded my arms gently, not defensively, but in quiet certainty. So yes, I said, letting each word linger. We're living together starting today. But things are going to be different now. Their silence was answer enough. I let the weight of silence stretch for a moment longer, watching the three of them take in the truth. Then I moved closer, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor like punctuation marks, each step deliberate. Let's make something very clear. I began, my tone calm, almost gentle, but firm enough that no one dared interrupt. If we're going to live together, it's not going to be the way it used to be. This is my home, and my rules apply here. No exceptions. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his confidence finally cracking. Linda raised her chin, as if trying to summon the authority she had always carried, but I held her gaze until she looked away. Rachel fidgeted with the magazine in her lap, the glossy pages whispering under her fingers. First, I said, turning to Mark, you and I are partners, not master and servant. I expect respect, honesty, and contribution, financially and emotionally. No more dismissing my choices or assuming I'll bend around yours. If you want this marriage to survive, you step up as an equal. Nothing less. He nodded quickly, though his eyes darted nervously to his mother. I turned to Linda. As for you, I won't tolerate constant judgment or veiled insults. If you choose to live here, you treat me with respect. That means no undermining, no comparisons, no condescending remarks. You raised a son, but you did not raise me. And you don't get to dictate how I live my life. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she stayed quiet. For once. Finally, my eyes landed on Rachel. She was younger, still hiding behind sarcasm and observation, but I saw the flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes. Rachel, you've spent too long living in your mother's shadow, watching others instead of finding yourself. If you're here, you'll contribute, help with the house, get a job, take classes, something. No more coasting on other people's lives. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked down, cheeks flushed, and gave a small nod. I exhaled slowly, letting my words settle over the room.
These aren't requests.
These are conditions. I've fought too hard, cried too many nights, and bled into this life I've built to let it be trampled. If any of you can't accept that, the door is right there. The pendant around my neck felt warm against my skin, like my grandmother's voice whispering approval. This was my strength, my story, finally spoken aloud. Mark finally broke the silence. I understand, Sam. We'll adjust. Linda looked at me then, not with affection, not yet, but with something closer to recognition. As if, for the first time, she was seeing me not as the girl who had married her son, but as a woman standing firmly in her own right. Rachel shifted, her eyes softening. Maybe this is what I need too. I nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement. The balance had shifted. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy on my chest. It felt clear, alive, mine. The first week was awkward, almost unbearably so. Mark tiptoed around the apartment, careful with every word. Linda tried to help in the kitchen, but often stopped herself mid-comment, biting down on criticisms that once would have rolled off her tongue. Rachel spent long hours scrolling job boards at the dining table, earbuds in, a determined crease forming on her forehead. It wasn't perfect. There were slip-ups, moments where old habits crept in. But there was also effort.
Change.
A slow but steady acknowledgement that this wasn't the same dynamic as before. One evening, I found Rachel sitting on the balcony, knees tucked to her chest, her phone glowing in the dark. She looked up at me, her eyes tired but softer than I'd ever seen them. "I applied for a photography course," she admitted. I've always wanted to, but Mom never thought it was practical." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. "Then it's about time you start living your life, Rachel, not someone else's." Even Linda surprised me. One afternoon, she placed a cup of tea in front of me, her movements stiff but intentional. "You've done well for yourself," she murmured, unable to look me in the eye. I may not have said it before, but I see it now. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and everyone had retreated to their rooms, I would sit by the window, the city lights glittering below like a sea of possibilities. I'd touch the silver phoenix pendant at my throat, the same one that had anchored me through every moment of doubt. My grandmother's voice echoed softly in memory. "Never shrink yourself for anyone. Your strength is your story." And now, my story wasn't just survival. It was victory.
Growth.
A reminder that the girl who once trembled under judgment had become a woman who could command a room with silence alone. I realized then that family doesn't have to mean surrender. It can mean boundaries. It can mean honesty. It can mean rewriting the rules so no one loses themselves in the process. The woman staring back at me in the glass was no longer afraid of being underestimated. She was steady, resilient, unshakable. And as I whispered to the reflection, to the city, to the life I had built with my own hands, the words carried a weight I would never forget. "We may be living together starting today, but I will never, ever live small again."